Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Boruto episode 203 review. Alright guys, this episode was absolutely amazing. I didn't necessarily have the expectations that high minimum because I thought the animation wasn't necessarily going to be that good, and it wasn't necessarily that good, but just the overall aura surrounding this episode, when I tell you it was like a one-to-one comparison in terms of actual feel in the Boruto manga, it was absolutely amazing. This was the first time we got to see Jigen, the leader of the Kado organization, in actual action, and to put a cherry on top of that, it was actually versus the Hokage Naruto himself. Now of course there's a couple other people sprinkled in there, and I do want to talk about that a little bit later on in this episode. And the iconic dialogue, which I was afraid that they would cut out, was actually brought to the Boruto anime. As soon as Jigen entered Naruto's residence and realized that he was in the living room, he apologized to Naruto for having his shoes on in his living room. This man has to be one of the most polite villains I have ever seen, but regardless, that politeness completely took a 180 as soon as Naruto charged at him. Now from the rip, we found out that Jigen is no regular ninja. This guy right here is absolutely elite. Naruto couldn't necessarily handle him with only taijutsu. That was made very clear in this episode, and especially that he was nowhere close to Delta in regards to strength. This guy was literally miles ahead, or this guy is literally miles ahead. And one of the things that I do want to talk about has to be Konohamaru. This right here was not in the Boruto manga, and I'm gonna tell you guys right now, I don't know what Konohamaru and the Boruto writers have, but I'm pretty damn sure that they have absolute disdain for the character of Konohamaru and just wants to make this guy look like a clown at every single turn. Now I can't necessarily blame him too much, mainly because obviously no one in this episode did anything against Jigen. He was literally like a juggernaut in this episode, but they did something completely different with the character of Konohamaru. First things first, Konohamaru gave Jigen his longest, I should say, sparring session, because Jigen pretty much told him beforehand, he said, yo, I'll indulge you for a second. So Jigen was kind of playing with Konohamaru, so of course he pretty much let Konohamaru get off his little attacks, and then he pretty much done away with Konohamaru. But here's the problem that I have with Konohamaru. While Naruto was getting serious, while Naruto was really trying to keep up with Jigen, he had to worry about Konohamaru. Konohamaru was in the middle of the battlefield being a liability as usual, and Naruto had to be distracted to actually try to save this man, and in turn got Naruto hit with one of those rods as well. But one of the biggest characters in this episode has to be Kawaki. A couple of things about Kawaki. One of the first things I do want to talk about is that Kawaki went into the second mode of the Carvasil. During the manga series, the fans have dubbed this form KawaShiki, pretty much the otsutsuki form of Kawaki himself. This right here is something completely brand new that Kawaki has never really seen, and Jigen's facial expression pretty much gave it away. This right here is something that they've never really seen from Kawaki as well, and also Akashi and Koji. Now not only that, Kawaki also has some very good speaking roles in this episode as well. Kawaki offered himself to be a prisoner in Jigen's whole scheme to free Naruto. Now this right here was coming off of the heels of Jigen trying to gaslight and kind of manipulate Kawaki into thinking that Naruto was just using him for the overall plan and for the overall village. And of course, the sentimental scene with Naruto and Kawaki right before Jigen takes Naruto to the other dimension was absolute gold in this episode. I mean, you could really just see how far they actually did come along. And of course, it's completely different when we talk about them expressing their feelings to each other in a regular setting, in a calm setting. But now you have Naruto and Kawaki in the heat of battle, and they're still basically showing their loyalty for each other. Is something completely brand new. Now in huge situations like this where it doesn't actually take away from the action, I love when the Boruto anime, or any show for that matter, I actually do have multiple different scenes in multiple different settings in a particular episode. So in this episode you had the extreme situation with Naruto, Jigen, and also Kawaki, but also on the other hand you see Boruto train with Mitsuki and his karma still activating completely out of nowhere, and of course that just adds to the overall aura of this episode. And then you have Sada along with Ino, and then on the other hand you also have a whole bunch of other gettings that we haven't necessarily seen in a long time. By the way, I do want to point out Iwabe in this episode did kind of show us in the same frame as Kawaki. Now for the people who are kind of new to this, a very big theory at the beginning of the Boruto series was that Iwabe was actually Kawaki, because there's a very long time of the Boruto anime where we just did not see Kawaki, and we thought that Iwabe himself could have potentially been Kawaki, obviously because he had his hat on. This episode right here was the first time that we did see Kawaki and Iwabe in the same frame, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm not necessarily trying to start any conspiracies, but it's definitely possible that Iwabe just did a shadow clone and pretty much put himself in the same frame as Iwabe as Kawaki so people could stop asking questions. I don't know, let me know what you guys think. So it comes to a point in the episode where Jigen actually does take Naruto to another dimension. Now I do want to point out, overall, this right here is a very big problem with the character of Naruto, because we understand that the character of Naruto is extremely overpowered. We understand that Naruto is absolutely elite, but one thing that Naruto has a significant disadvantage with is the fact that he does not have time, space, and ninjutsu. So in theory, if Jigen takes Naruto to a different dimension and Sasuke was not there, Sasuke doesn't necessarily have any traces of Naruto's chakra, Naruto's gone. Naruto is gone forever. And I do want to point you guys back and refer you guys back to the first scene of the first episode where Kawaki tells Boruto, I'm going to send you to where I sent the 7th. This right here could possibly imply that Kawaki himself did this same exact thing to Naruto. So of course, because Naruto has this significant blind spot in his repertoire, this right here is definitely a problem. But lucky for Naruto, Sasuke was there in the nick of time, and Sasuke did actually save Naruto. Sasuke kicked Jigen, pretty much says, you let your guard down, something along the lines of that, and the Boruto riders are now setting up for an insane battle in the next episode, and we've seen that from the preview. Now my first opinion on Jigen, when I first seen him in the Boruto anime, I thought that he was a little bit too nonchalant. I thought the overall aura of the character didn't necessarily command the respect that he actually deserved. But in this episode, it's like we've seen a completely different side of Jigen. And it wasn't necessarily like the animation, the art style was absolutely insane either. This was just like regular art style, regular animation, but just the overall aura and the feel of the character of Jigen, it was absolutely insane. So I do have to give a huge kudos to the Boruto writers in this episode for bringing the aura of Jigen out like that. Now the last aspect that I do want to talk about for this episode has to be the Kashin Koji angle. This right here has been huge throughout the whole series of Boruto mainly because we all have the idea, or a lot of anime onlys right now have the idea, that Kashin Koji could potentially be Jiraiya, a clone of Jiraiya, a twin of Jiraiya, an ancestor of Jiraiya, a whole bunch of things. We just have absolutely no idea at this particular point anime wise. Manga readers, please calm down. But regardless, it's seeming more and more likely that Kashin Koji was the actual traitor, and Jigen himself kind of knew all along, because it was made very clear that Jigen didn't necessarily need a mission to actually retrieve the vessel mail, because he could have instantaneously transported right in front of Kawaki whenever he wanted to. Logically thinking, when Jigen understood that the vessel went missing, he wanted to round up a couple of people to actually go after Kawaki to see if they would actually do it instead of actually disobeying his orders. Now I'm not gonna lie, I have all the respect for Kashin Koji in the world, but in this episode my man looked absolutely petrified. I feel like if Jigen would have looked in the direction of Kashin Koji, this man would have probably fainted a bit. And of course he did kind of do such a thing, man, because he did look at the frog and understood that Kashin Koji was monitoring the situation. Now I do want to point out, overall, this doesn't necessarily guarantee that Jigen has the idea that Kashin Koji is the traitor or anything like that, mainly because Kashin Koji had a reason to actually be there. He was pretty much monitoring the situation with Kawaki and the other character, the brand new character in their eyes, with the car missile, which is going to be Boruto. So obviously Kashin Koji had a good motive. Now of course Kashin Koji has to explain this motive and explain why he didn't necessarily capture Kawaki right then and there, but of course Kashin Koji, as of right now, in my opinion, he's definitely in the clear. Now of course, for anime onlys out there, it's still going to be a question of if Kashin Koji could potentially join this battle in the future, if Jigen is even going to be able to take down Naruto and Sasuke. The next episode is going to be an absolutely amazing episode, 100%. Everyone is thinking that, and rightfully so. But let me know what you guys think about this episode in the comment section below. Give me your opinions about the first time that we've seen Jigen in action, and also give me your opinions about, of course, Naruto and Kawaki's relationship in this episode. But it's been your boy Baara B, and we out.
It's a knife.